For that, tonight, police have discovered the body of British businessman Campbell Scott, who went missing in Nairobi's Westlands area. Makueni County Police Commander Alice Kimeli has confirmed that the body found in Makongo Forest over the weekend was his. Police have arrested a taxi driver and a waiter in connection.
Some killers don't strike out of rage. They don't kill because they are cornered. They kill because they can. And sometimes, the darkness that lives in people's minds doesn't just take a lift. It hunts, plans, and plays with it. In February 2025, Campbell Scott, an accomplished 58-year-old executive from the global giant FICO, landed in Nairobi, Kenya. He wasn't a thrill seeker. He wasn't reckless. He was here for work, for a simple corporate event, the kind of trip he had done dozens of times before. But what he didn't know was that he had already been chosen. By the time he checked into his hotel, the trap was set. A network of predators was already moving, calculating, waiting. They didn't just want his money. They wanted control. They wanted the game. Because, for this syndicate, the kill is only the finale. The real thrill comes in the hunt, luring their victim, stripping them of power, and dragging them into a world they can't escape. Scott went out for a normal evening in Nairobi. A drink, a handshake, maybe a friendly chat. But in the shadows, men and women with dead eyes and practiced smiles were circling. When he left that bar and stepped into a taxi, his life didn't just take a wrong turn. It crossed into their ritual. 6 days later, a herdsman would stumble on a pineapple sack in a forest in Wote, Makueni County. Inside was Campbell Scott, tortured, bound, and decomposing. But this story isn't just about murder. It's about a syndicate that thrives on deception, humiliation, and fear. A spiderweb that has claimed victims for years and somehow always slips through the cracks. And tonight, we are stepping into their world. A world where ordinary motives, money, blackmail, are twisted into something much darker. This is Dark Our Dogs, and this is the mind-bending, terrifying story of the murder of Campbell Scott. Campbell Scott was a British businessman. He is from Dunfermline in Fife, a city in Scotland. He was a senior director at FICO, an American data analytics company. His major area of specialization was credit evaluation. On that fateful day, Scott had come to Nairobi for a 3-day conference. He had been to many cities in his career before. Nairobi was supposed to be just another business stop. Numbers on a slide deck, polite handshakes, and a flight home. But this trip was different. On February 16, 2025, Scott landed in Nairobi for FICO's partnership event with TransUnion, Kenya's leading credit bureau. He was a senior director, a man used to security and structure. He checked into the hotel, sent a few work emails, and attended his first meetings without incident. This was the Marriott Hotel in Westlands. But somewhere in the background, a clock had started ticking. Unknown to him, he had already appeared on someone's radar. His movements were being watched, his habits studied. Because in Nairobi's underbelly, there exists a small network of predators who see businessmen not as people, but as working opportunities. 2 nights later, Scott decided to step out, maybe to unwind, maybe for a drink, maybe just to feel the city outside the glass walls of his hotel. He ended up at Havana Bar, a casual spot in Nairobi's Central Business District. Here, he had drinks with a friend. CCTV footage later captured what looked like a friendly and eventful evening. Scott was seen talking to a man in a white t-shirt and blue jeans. Nothing remarkable. They laughed, exchanged a handshake, and then walked out together into the cool night air. But that handshake was a death sentence. The man hailed a taxi, and Scott got in. The car drove towards Pipeline Estate, a densely populated area on Nairobi's eastern side. He was never seen alive again. Hours passed, His hotel room remained empty, his phone went silent, emails went unanswered. By morning, the worry began. FICO colleagues tried calling, but no answer. Scott had not showed up to the meeting. By the second day, his disappearance was reported. Kenya police began their initial search, treating it as a missing person case. CCTV and cell tower data gave them their first lead, the taxi driver. When tracked down, he confirmed the drop-off at Pipeline Estate, but by the time police arrived, Scott was gone. Investigators questioned a waiter from Havana Bar, trying to piece together the last conversation Scott ever had. Nothing concrete emerged, just fragments, shadows of a plan that had already unfolded. Then, 6 days later, the horror revealed itself. A herdsman walking through Makongo Forest, more than 60 miles from Nairobi, stumbled upon a sack stuffed with pineapples. Except it wasn't just fruit. Inside was Campbell Scott's decomposed body, hands tied, body bound, and discarded like a piece of trash. His body bore signs of torture, but the cause of death wasn't immediately clear. Toxicology reports were ordered. For police, this was no longer a missing persons case. This was a manhunt, because whoever had done this had done it before. When investigators began to pull on the threads of Campbell Scott's death, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a random act of violence. It was a harvest. Scott wasn't just killed. He was stripped, his phone gone, his wallet gone, his bank accounts bleeding money. In the hours after his disappearance, over Kenya shillings 2 million, nearly 12,000 pounds, was withdrawn from his accounts. The transactions were surgical, precise, and timed. This wasn't a mugging gone wrong. This was a planned extraction, the way a predator drains its prey. Police dug deeper and followed the money. It led them to 3 main suspects: Alphonse Munyao Kilewa, Benard Mbunga Mbusu, Samuel Musembi Kamitu. But here's where the case turned from simple robbery to something far darker. Investigators discovered that Scott had likely been lured under the guise of trust, a fake business meeting, a friendly encounter, or maybe the promise of local investment opportunities. Whatever the bait, the hook had been set long before he ever stepped into that taxi. This syndicate's real motive went beyond the cash. It was power. Their method followed a pattern. 1. Identify the target. Someone wealthy, someone alone, someone who wouldn't see it coming. 2. Offer something ordinary, even comforting. A conversation, a drink, or a ride. 3. Slowly remove control. Take the phone, the bank cards, and the sense of safety. Finally, drain them, both financially and psychologically. Police believed Samuel Musembi played a key role in the disposal of Scott's body. He is suspected to have driven Scott's body over 100 kilometers from Pipeline to Makongo Forest. But in a twist that seemed almost cinematic, Musembi himself was found dead just days later. A single stab wound in his friend's house in Dandora. The cause of death was allegedly self-inflicted by suicide. Was it guilt or fear? Because this wasn't a syndicate of amateurs. It was a circle of predators, and circles closed in on their weakest links. Police quietly theorized that Musembi's death was not a suicide, but a cleanup, a warning to anyone who might talk. In criminal networks like this, silence is currency and betrayal is death. The investigation, now officially a murder probe, was uncovering more than just a robbery. This wasn't just about money, it was about domination, ritual, and control. And the further police dug into the past of this syndicate, the more it became clear. Campbell Scott wasn't their first victim. Criminals like this don't appear out of nowhere. They practice, they refine, they feed on the thrill until nothing short of death satisfies them. The murder of Campbell Scott was shocking to the world, but to investigators digging through police records, It was horrifyingly familiar. The man at the center of this web of violence was Benard Mbunga Mbusu. If Campbell Scott was the prey, Benard was the spider. Benard was the man in the CCTV footage walking out of Havana bar with Scott. He was the one who hailed the taxi. He was the last person seen with the victim. But Benard wasn't a ghost. He was a name that had haunted case files for years. He operated a crew alongside two others, Alex Mutua Kiduka and Albunas Mutinda Nzioki. On February 2024, Nairobi's Nyayo Stadium was hosting a massive religious crusade led by televangelist Benny Hinn. Tens of thousands gathered for prayer, worship, and hope. Among them was a city pastor, exhausted from the day and looking for food. He never expected that faith would walk him into a trap. Benard approached with two men, Samuel Musembi and Alphonse Munyao. They wore friendly smiles, engaged in harmless talk, and then a car pulled up. The doors swung open, and the pastor was violently bundled inside. He was beaten, stripped, and threatened. He was forced to reveal his M-Pesa PIN, and within hours, Kenya shillings 55,000 was gone. Then he was dumped on the roadside, humiliated, trembling, praying that this was the end. For the ringleader, this wasn't his first taste of the hunt. October 11, 2020 ties him to yet another incident. Police raided a quiet house in Ruaka, just north of Nairobi, where they found a Turkish national. He had been tied to a chair, bruised, blindfolded, and terrified. The room was a torture chamber, with the culprits being these four, led by Benard. This was their ritual: lure foreign men through dating apps, blindfold them, beat them, force them to reveal ATM pins, sometimes drag them to cash machines, other times blackmail them with compromising photos. Then, when the victim was completely broken, they dumped him like garbage. The pattern was chilling: bait with charm, trap with fear, drain the soul and the bank account, discard like yesterday's trash. The Campbell Scott's murder wasn't an escalation by accident. It was the natural evolution of a predator that had been allowed to hunt for years. And each time they got away, the crimes became bolder. Each victim suffered longer. Each escape emboldened them. By 2025, Benard and his syndicates were no longer just thieves. They were psychological hunters, men and women addicted to the control, the thrill, and the silent screams of powerless victims. And for Campbell Scott, they saved their most elaborate hunt yet. By the time Campbell Scott climbed into that taxi, the syndicate's trap had already closed around him. But this was no ordinary robbery. This was a ritual, a step-by-step performance perfected over years of hunting. To understand it, investigators had to rewind the clock, go back to the nightmarish stories buried in Nairobi's criminal files. October 11, 2020, in a modest two-story house in Ruaka, police made a discovery that would haunt them for years. Inside, a Turkish national was tied to a chair. His wrists were raw from ropes, his eyes swollen from beatings. He wasn't just robbed, he was broken. The house was more than a crime scene, it was a psychological theater. Curtains drawn, phones charged, cameras ready. The syndicate operated like stage directors of terror. Step 1, lure the victim, often through dating apps. Their targets were men, sometimes tourists, sometimes locals, often those who felt invisible or isolated. Step 2, once inside, strip away their control. Blindfold them, check their phones, make the walls close in. Step 3, introduce pain and humiliation. Slaps, punches, whispered threats. Sometimes they took compromising photos with a semi-nude accomplice to blackmail the victim's silence. Step 4, drain the bank accounts. Move money fast through M-Pesa, ATMs, and agents. Step 5, discard the victim in a remote area, alive if they were lucky, traumatized either way. This wasn't theft, it was a psychological torture dressed as a business plan. The syndicate evolved. By 2024, they were no longer just targeting locals or tourists looking for companionship. They had escalated to higher value prey. Businessmen, executives, anyone who looked like they'd pay in fear or in cash. Police discovered that Campbell Scott's case mirrored this ritual perfectly. He had been lured into a false sense of security, stripped of his devices and freedom, humiliated and tortured, financially drained, and finally, erased. The name Benard Mbunga appeared in multiple case files as the bait and the social bridge to the victim. He was friendly, approachable, and forgettable. Exactly the kind of face you wouldn't wonder about shaking hands with in a bar. What investigators realized was chilling. For the Syndicate, this wasn't just about the cash. The blackmail photos, the torture, the psychological games, they suggested a thrill in total domination. The robbery was the reward, but the process, including the hunt, the fear, the moment a victim knew they were powerless, that was the real addiction. Campbell Scott had stepped into a carefully rehearsed nightmare, a trap that had worked many times before, and one the killers believed would always work. But this time, they didn't just leave a traumatized man on the roadside, they took it further. Because when predators get away too many times, they start to believe they are untouchable. And that arrogance would soon tear the city's underworld wide open. Predators this calculated rarely appear out of nowhere. They evolve in the shadows, and every time they slip through the system's fingers, they grow bolder. By the time Campbell Scott landed in Nairobi, Benard wasn't just a career criminal. He was a phantom in the city's police files. He had been caught before, he had confessed before, and he had escaped before. In early 2020, a Kenyan of Indian descent, Naraj Devraj, would cross paths with this syndicate. Devraj had gone to visit a friend in Nairobi West who, however, was not at the home. He never imagined that a friendly woman named Mary Muki Kioko would be the first step into a nightmare. He took a cab, driven by the woman, in a casual ride back home. But in a chilling twist of events, when the taxi door shut, the illusion shattered. Two men slid into the back seat, one on each side. Naraj was sandwiched, blindfolded, and his world turned into darkness. The syndicate's playbook unfolded with cold precision. They stripped him, photographed him with a semi-nude woman, and threatened to leak the photos to his family and colleagues. The message was clear: obey or be destroyed. They also stole 108,000 Kenya shillings from his account. Police eventually tracked the gang, recovering 6 mobile phones, multiple ATM cards, and a bank agent ledger. Among those arrested were Mary Kioko and Gideon Mbusu. Mary Muki Kioko had been arrested before for luring men through social media and robbing them.
Elsewhere from the courts, a 28-year-old actress was today charged with robbery with violence. Mary Muki Kioko is suspected to be the leader of a criminal gang that has been using social media to lure men who are later tortured and robbed. She's accused of robbing a victim of 453,000 shillings while armed with a knife.
This should have been the end, but Benard had slipped away. During a police operation, he escaped over a perimeter wall, vanishing into the Nairobi's night like he had rehearsed it 100 times. However, Alex Mutua would later be formally charged with the murder of Scott, while other suspects remain at large. And that wasn't an isolated incident. Each time his syndicate was caught, witnesses went silent and evidence got lost. The charges would later disappear in thin air. Was it corruption, fear, or had the syndicate already learned that money can erase almost any crime? The result was the same. He had escaped in 2020, a case had been dismissed in 2022, and in 2024, he was detained, then released again. Every failure of the system fed his ego, and every escape escalated the cruelty. By the time Campbell Scott crossed paths with Benard, the syndicate had evolved into predators who didn't believe in consequences. They weren't just stealing, they were performing in a theater of humiliation, fear, and death, and the world was their stage. At this point, their actions were not by accident. They were acts by predators who had learned that the system never bites back. Some murders are committed by people, others by systems. Campbell Scott's killers didn't act alone. Yes, they tied the knots, stole the money, and dumped the body. But they had help, not from willing accomplices, but from a system that had every chance to stop them and didn't. Did bribes change hands in dim corridors? Did fear silence the witnesses? Or is the machine itself so broken that predators can slip through like smoke? Whatever the truth, it bought the Syndicate time to perfect their ritual of control. Time to select bigger prey and believe they were untouchable. Campbell Scott came to Kenya to build connections, not to vanish into the shadows of a forest. He didn't know that behind the smiles and handshakes lurked predators who see human lives as currency. They lured him, broke him, and erased him. And the most chilling part, this syndicate is not unique. They are part of a pattern, one that thrives in every city where money, trust, and silence intersect. The question is, how many more will suffer until they are stopped? This is Dark Hour Dogs. Remember to stay alert and never forget that evil often smiles before striking.